Hi Copic in the Craft Room fans, Michelle Houghton here. I am going to be coloring up some images that I have. This is probably one of my oldest stamp sets that I have. I am a Winnie the Pooh fan in a big way, if you know me at all. And then I am stamping these on art squares, these Inchie art squares. They are made of matte board, so it's a thicker board. You're going to notice the stamp portion is actually not very clear. In fact, there's some pieces that didn't stamp. My stamp set has aged enough that the rubber has turned almost to plastic. It's crispy. And so it is not stamping well. So sadly, I'm probably going to have to get rid of that stamp set if I can't find a way to kind of recondition or re-soften those rubber stamps. In the meantime, I've been looking for some stamps like this, and I found a few on Etsy. So I think I found a couple classic Pooh Bear stamps that I can replace these with. What I like about these art squares, you're going to see this as I start coloring, is it has beautiful soft blending. I do have to be careful about ink going outside the lines. It's going to travel quite a bit because this is a very soft coating that is on matte board. And so just kind of watch. You'll see a little bit of creeping, and I try to stay really light at the edges. And I don't need a lot of ink for this to work. So I've started with a Y32, which is a perfect Winnie the Pooh color. It's nice and warm. And then I'm going to add some Y35 for kind of a darker yellow to add some shape to my Winnie the Pooh. So remember, he's a very round bear. And so we're going to give him that round shape kind of coming in from the edges. Remember that highlight or the kind of area that catches the sun is going to be similar to his shape. So look at that highlight being kind of rounded. Top of his head, ears, arms and legs are a little more cylindrical. Now I'm actually going to a Y28. And some of that is to try to make some of these lines disappear a little bit with that no line coloring idea. I could go to a Y38, but it ends up looking a little orange to me. So this to me is going to keep him in that wonderful sunny yellow that I think of for Winnie the Pooh. So you can see there's a pretty big gap between those two colors, but as I come back with my Y35, this is one of the really nice things about these little art squares. Because the surface is such a soft paper, it's going to blend really easily and kind of push that color around and kind of let it melt together, which is the beautiful part of Copic markers. And then these art squares really allow me to do that. So this is one of the reasons you'll see some high-end artists coloring on what's called Bristol board or matte board, because it has this wonderful soft effect. Now it's different coloring. You have to practice with it like anything else, but it has some beautiful blending attributes to it. So I'm going to start with an R81 on Piglet, and I'm hitting his head and arms and little feet. So that's the R81, and then I'm going to come in with a darker R85. And again, here's this big jump. I've skipped a mid-tone, but again, remember what I'm working on. So this is different coloring. I don't necessarily need every color in my kind of range. I can do some bigger jumps because it's going to help me do that blending with that softer paper. So I'm going to go back to my R81. I start right on the edge and kind of pull that R85 into the R81 area. And that creates that mid-tone and that gentle gradation between the two colors. Again, barely touching that color, and it's starting to pull and soften. So this, I'm using my medium or my paper to my advantage. So I've got an E70 that I'm filling his little body in with, Piglet's body, and then E71, and I'm going in and I'm trying to kind of accentuate the stripes, and I probably needed one darker color to do this. But as much as anything, I'm really just trying to get the texture and the feel of him. And you can still see those little stamp lines, and I'm not necessarily going for erasing those. So I actually leave it just as is. There's no blending here. I'm just going to leave that because I can see that texture, which I want to see, because you can see that on his body whenever you see images of him. A YG61 is where I'm starting for the ground, and I'm just going to put him on kind of a grassy field. So I'm using just kind of a scribble stroke, as much as anything, kind of horizontal bands of it. And that's hard to see with the way I'm turning it, but it kind of goes across horizontally across that little square, up and down. And then this YG63, you're going to see that more. Very loose. I'm using a little bit more up on the tip of my marker to get a smaller kind of up and down stroke, almost like a zigzag, to get that look of kind of the texture of a grass or just kind of open field feel, just slowing down as I get up against the bodies and legs of Eeyore and Pooh. The next thing I am going to do is I'm focusing in underneath their feet. And I do want to get that a little bit darker, but I don't necessarily want to take away from this feel of kind of this grassy texture. So I'm coming in, and this is one darker. It's a YG 6-7. And then I'm going back to the 6-1 to soften the whole thing. So I'm literally just brushing over kind of one coat. It does not take much. I'm not trying to blend it. I'm trying to soften it. So it's like one pass. Notice I'm still doing, for the most part, kind of that up and down kind of scribble or zigzag across that page horizontally. And it's one loose pass, very light, that just softens that up. I'm turning these guys upside down now because I've got a BG 000 that I'm going to use for the sky. Now, notice I'm not going to fill this in. I'm actually going to leave some little areas, this base that's kind of this beautiful creamy white, and those are going to become clouds here in a second. So I've left those little areas white, or the the base of that Inchie Art square, and then I'm coming back into the center and using my colorless blender to push out and soften those edges a little bit more. And then I'm coming back in actually with a B00. I first did BG 000 again, but then I come in with a B00, and I'm coming right up underneath those clouds, just a little, kind of a little scallop, loose stroke, because I want to accentuate those clouds so you can see them even better. It's super, super subtle, but it just gives barely enough color change and variation to really kind of pop those clouds just enough so you can see them a little bit better. All right, so the last thing I am going to do is I'm going to tuck this guy onto a card here fairly shortly and show you how that ends up. I realized pretty quickly, though, that one thing I'd lost in all of this was poor Piglet's little eye. He's turned sideways just enough that we can see his eye. So I bring in a sepia multiliner. It's a 0.3 thickness, and I just literally dot that little eye so we don't lose that completely. And I'm sorry, but I've gotten so close in my filming that the camera's having a little trouble focusing in and out. Anyways, this is a really fun little tiny image. It's about, I think these are 2-inch squares or 1.5. Yeah, I think these guys, yeah, 2-inch squares by Art Squares from Inchie Art Incorporated. This was a set that I've had for a really long time. They come in these little boxes sets, and I have 3-inch squares and 2-inch squares. They come in both kind of that white mat board, but they also come in craft. I assume you can still find these online, but really fun and different and unique. If you have not had the chance to recently, stop by my blog at scrapweaver.com and check out all of my live teaching classes and things going on. Thanks so much for coming by today. Have a happy, colorful day.